The city of Chang'an lies before you like a careful lattice of streets and courtyards, planned not for haste but for order. Imagine yourself stepping into its wide avenues in the 8th century, when the Tang Dynasty is at the height of its power. The capital stretches for miles, a deliberate grid whose grand gates open to travelers, merchants, and pilgrims from every direction. By day the city hums with the patient sound of wooden carts and the faint rhythm of iron-shod hooves. But it is at night, during the Lantern Festival at the close of the New Year celebrations, that the city shifts into something almost unrecognizable. You begin in the ward of East Market, where shop fronts line the street like tidy drawers in a merchant's cabinet. Lanterns, silken, papered, and painted, hang from eaves and poles. They are not the blinding lights of a modern festival but soft spheres of color, glowing amber and pale rose, casting reflections on the polished stone pavement. Vendors prepare for the evening hours with the calm repetition of people who have done this many times before. A woman sorts bundles of cinnamon and star anise, their warm fragrance weaving into the cool night air. A potter arranges rows of small clay cups for tea, each identical in its quiet perfection. The Lantern Festival marks the 15th day of the first lunar month, a date tied to both agricultural rhythms and the official calendar of the Tang court. Court astrologers have already studied the heavens, assuring the emperor that the omens are auspicious. In the palace precincts, officials have spent weeks planning ceremonies to please both gods and people, but out here in the market, the festival belongs to ordinary citizens. Scholars step from their studies, their robes brushing the dust of the street. Laborers who carried loads all day now stroll empty-handed. Children tug at parents' sleeves, pointing at painted tigers or fish-shaped lanterns bobbing in the breeze. You pause beside a tea stall where kettles hiss over charcoal braziers. The stall owner, a man with sleeves rolled back to the elbow, pours dark oolong into small cups. He speaks in a low, unhurried voice to a group of travelers from Silla, the Korean kingdom that sends tribute and scholars to Chang'an. Their language blends with the deeper sounds of Persian merchants negotiating the price of musk and glass beads. The Silk Road ends here, but the night market feels like a road that continues in every direction, west toward Samarkand, east toward the islands of Japan, south along the Grand Canal. Look upward. Across the dark sky hang lanterns shaped like rabbits, dragons, and lotus blooms. Artisans have stretched silk across bamboo frames, painting them with mineral pigments that catch the lamplight. Some lanterns hold candles. Others, filled with thin oil, burn more steadily. The city authorities have approved thousands of them, even though each requires careful placement to avoid fire. Watchmen walk with long poles and buckets of water, a quiet guard against sudden sparks. The festival is not only for the eyes. Musicians set up near the drum tower, playing lutes and flutes in rhythms slow enough to settle into the body. From another corner drifts the gentle clap of wooden fish blocks, keeping time for a troupe of masked dancers who enact scenes from old folktales. Their movements are deliberate, never hurried, as if each step is measured to match the length of a breath. Consider the people who keep this night moving. There are lamplighters who climb wooden ladders to adjust the wicks, government clerks recording crowd numbers on bamboo slips, and physicians who stand ready with herbal remedies for anyone faint from the press of bodies. None of these roles is grand, yet without them the festival would fade into confusion. Even the city's famed sanitation crews play their part, sweeping refuse before it can gather, so the streets remain almost miraculously clean by morning. As you wander deeper, the scale of the market reveals itself. Rows of food stalls offer delicacies that traveled weeks to reach this table. Candied walnuts from the western regions, pickled mustard greens from the south, and the beloved glutinous rice balls filled with black sesame paste that mark this festival. The rice balls, called yuan shao, are eaten not for novelty but for tradition, their roundness symbolizing the cycle of the year and the fullness of family reunion. You lift one with chopsticks, noticing the slight give of the dough before it yields to a burst of sweet, nutty warmth. The imperial court has not forgotten this night. Though you are far from the palace, you can imagine the Emperor Xuanzong, perhaps, if you place yourself in the middle decades of the century, watching from a high terrace. Historical records describe how he ordered enormous lantern towers to be built, some rising more than 100 feet, covered in gauze and hung with tens of thousands of small lights. From such a height, the city below would look like a lake of fireflies. Each market wore a ripple of soft flame. Trade and diplomacy breathed through these streets. Delegations from the Abbasid Caliphate, travelers from distant India, and emissaries from the kingdoms of Central Asia walk side by side. They bring stories of deserts and mountains, but tonight those stories settle quietly under the same lantern glow. A Buddhist monk from Khotan might pause beside a Taoist priest, each observing the other with mild curiosity, neither in a hurry to speak. As the hour grows later, the music slows and the crowd thickens into a steady tide. You notice details easy to miss: the faint blue of indigo-dyed robes, the polished grain of a merchant's counting board, the careful knot of a child's sash. Somewhere a storyteller begins a low recital of the peach blossom spring, a tale of a hidden utopia. People gather, leaning close, the words mingling with the scent of burning sandalwood. You find yourself wondering how many nights like this have passed, each one carefully documented by none but the stars. What will become of these lanterns by morning? Will the wax drippings be swept away without a trace? Or will some faint scorch marks remain on the wooden poles? Perhaps centuries from now, archaeologists will unearth only shards of porcelain cups and a few copper coins, trying to imagine the glow that once bathed these stones. The festival stretches toward midnight. You feel the city breathing around you, its rhythm slow and deliberate, a heartbeat that does not quicken even as the crowd presses close. Somewhere beyond the market gates, the great walls of Chang'an hold their silent watch, and the Milky Way arches overhead, mirrored in the lantern-lit streets below. As you linger beneath a lantern shaped like a white crane, you might ask yourself, when the last flame gutters out and the night grows quiet, what stories will remain? Those told aloud, or those carried only in the gentle memory of light? You rejoin the evening's quiet rhythm where Section 1 left off, lantern light reflecting across the polished paving stones of Chang'an. The crowd has thickened, but the atmosphere remains unhurried, an entire city content to drift at a measured pace. Here, the night market is more than spectacle. It is a living engine of commerce and culture, a place where goods, ideas, and beliefs mingle under paper moons. Imagine the layers of preparation that make this festival possible. Weeks before the first lantern is lit, ward captains submit petitions to city officials. They negotiate stall placements, fire safety patrols, and the fees that keep the market orderly. In the Tang capital, no street market can exist without permission. Government scribes record every merchant's name, the types of wares, and the tax due for the night's trade. You might picture the bamboo slips, smooth, narrow, bundled in cords, carried to the administrative office by a junior clerk whose job is to see that the records remain legible despite the cold. Step closer to the merchants themselves. The aroma of sesame oil and grilled river fish lingers in the air, but your attention drifts to the quieter trades. A bookseller from Dunhuang arranges hand-copied sutras beside thin brushes of wolf hair. Each scroll has traveled weeks by camel caravan across the Gobi Desert. He sits cross-legged, not calling out, but allowing the faint fragrance of ink and paper to speak for him. Nearby, a woman displays bolts of ramie cloth dyed the color of pale jade. She speaks softly to potential buyers, her voice almost lost beneath the low hum of conversation. The Silk Road ends here, but its arteries thrum in every direction. A Sogdian trader displays blue glass beads that catch the lantern light like frozen drops of sky. Next to him, a Persian apothecary arranges tiny brass boxes of frankincense and myrrh. Their conversation, half in Chinese, half in Sogdian, forms a gentle counterpoint to the music drifting from the drum tower. The market is a multilingual murmur, a place where contracts are sealed with a nod rather than a flourish. The festival is not only a market, it is a stage for spiritual currents. As you move toward the northern gate, you pass Taoist adepts in flowing robes, their hair pinned high with bone combs. They chant softly, offering blessings for safe travel and long life. A Buddhist monk from Nalanda speaks with a Confucian scholar about the proper harmony of the cosmos. They do not debate to win but to share understanding, their tones slow and deliberate. A passerby pauses to listen, her child leaning sleepily against her side, absorbing words that float like incense smoke into the night. Music remains a constant thread. A troupe of court-approved performers tunes a set of pipa and shang, their instruments gleaming under lantern light. When they begin, the notes unfold at a leisurely pace, neither rushed nor grand. Each pluck of string seems to elongate the space around you, a sound made for wandering thoughts. Children, momentarily stilled by the melody, clutch small animal-shaped lanterns, their faces haloed in soft gold. As the hour deepens, you notice the unseen infrastructure that keeps the night alive. Water carriers move quietly with buckets suspended from yokes, ready for any sudden flame. City guards patrol in pairs, their footsteps muffled against the packed earth. They carry no weapons more threatening than wooden staves, for their presence is meant to reassure rather than intimidate. The Tang Dynasty prizes order, but this festival belongs to the people, and the guards know their role is to keep the peace without breaking the spell. Everywhere you look, the lanterns themselves demand admiration. Artisans have spent months preparing them, selecting bamboo strips flexible enough to bend into spheres or dragons, then covering the frames with silk or finely pounded mulberry paper. Pigments, vermilion, malachite, indigo, are mixed with animal glue to create colors that glow softly but endure the night's dampness. Some lanterns bear poems brushed in delicate calligraphy, verses about moonlight on river water or the gentle turning of the seasons. You pause before one depicting a carp leaping over a stylized gate, a wish for prosperity in the year to come. Your senses turn inward. The scent of sandalwood mingles with roasted chestnuts, the texture of worn stone cool beneath your feet, the sound of distant laughter folded into the slow music. Every detail invites a state of calm attention, as if the festival itself is an extended meditation. To walk these streets is to be part of a shared breath, the entire city inhaling and exhaling beneath a sky of small suns. Yet beneath the serenity lies a subtle tension. Chang'an is a cosmopolitan hub, and the government watches foreign merchants with cautious interest. Taxes must be collected, and officials must ensure that no seditious talk hides within the hum of trade. Somewhere in the administrative offices, a magistrate tallies the evening's revenues, bamboo brush squeaking lightly against parchment. Perhaps he wonders, as you do, how the fragile balance of celebration and control will hold through the night. Near the western edge of the market, a storyteller begins a new tale. He speaks of a fisherman who follows a lantern-lit river into the realm of immortals, never to return. Listeners lean closer, not for suspense but for the cadence of the words. The story drifts like a boat on still water, carrying everyone a little further from the concerns of daylight. You find your own mind wandering. How many such stories vanish after a single telling, leaving no trace but the quiet memory of those who listened? A sudden breeze stirs the lanterns, and their lights sway gently, throwing ripples of shadow across the faces around you. For a moment, the entire market seems to move like a single living thing, breathing in the cool night air. You wonder how many other travelers, merchants, pilgrims, curious wanderers, have stood where you stand, feeling the same mingled scent of incense and sesame oil, hearing the same soft music that has no need to end. In the distance, the great palace walls gleam faintly. Behind them, the emperor's own celebration continues. Enormous lantern towers, silk banners fluttering, perhaps even the faint strains of court music drifting outward. Yet here among the people, the festival feels more intimate, each small stall and glowing lamp a world of its own. The hour approaches midnight, You sense a quiet shift as vendors prepare for the night's second half. Tea is poured a little stronger. Braziers are stoked against the creeping chill. Children grow drowsy, their lanterns bobbing lower. Still, the crowd lingers, unwilling to leave the gentle enchantment of shared light. As you watch a craftsman adjust the wick of a fish-shaped lantern, a thought lingers like the faint scent of incense. When dawn finally arrives and the market dissolves into daylight, will these merchants, mystics, and musicians remember each other? Or will the memory of this night fade like smoke, leaving only the echo of lantern glow in the waking city? The hour nears the end of the festival, and the air carries a subtle shift. Lantern light still glimmers along the grand avenues of Chang'an, but a paler glow gathers on the eastern horizon. You notice it first as a faint paling of the night sky, then as the soft outlines of roof tiles etched against the dim gray of impending dawn. The festival does not end abruptly. It exhales, tapering like the final notes of a long, unhurried melody. You walk slowly, conscious of the countless small tasks unfolding as the city prepares for daylight. Vendors begin their quiet retreat, rolling up mats and stacking wooden trays with practiced efficiency. The scent of cooling braziers blends with the faint sweetness of spilled rice wine. A woman folds the cloth canopy of her tea stall, tying knots that will loosen easily when the next market day comes. There is no rush. The Lantern Festival is an annual rhythm, and every merchant knows this dance by heart. Children droop against their parents, lanterns now dim embers swinging from tired hands. Some have fallen asleep before their lights have fully extinguished, and their elders carry them gently through the thinning crowd. A musician plucks a final phrase on the pipa, a soft chord that seems to hang in the cool air long after the strings fall silent. Around him, the audience disperses in near silence, as if unwilling to break the delicate fabric of the night. You turn onto a quieter lane, where the administrative heartbeat of the city resumes its steady pulse. Government scribes, who spent the evening collecting fees and monitoring stalls, record their final tallies by the pale light of small oil lamps. Bamboo slips bearing lists of merchants and their wares will be tied into bundles and stored in the archives. Perhaps centuries later, fragments of those records will be uncovered, offering future historians little more than names and numbers. Yet those dry lines of ink are the scaffolding that held the evening together, silent proof of a night once alive with light. Passing the drum tower, you catch the slow, deliberate sound of the watchman striking the hour. Each resonant beat travels across the city, mingling with the distant crow of a rooster. The official curfew, suspended for the festival, will soon return. For one night, the city loosened its grip, allowing people to wander freely beyond the usual restrictions. Now the gates will resume their vigilance, each ward once again sealed for the safety and order prized by the Tang Dynasty. As the crowd thins, you notice details overlooked in the festival's brighter hours. Lantern frames, now cooled and dark, reveal the fine craftsmanship of bamboo joints and silken seams. A child's discarded shoe rests neatly beside a stall post, as though placed with care rather than dropped in haste. The air carries a faint metallic tang from the iron tools of the lamplighters, now resting after a long vigil. These remnants feel as meaningful as the spectacle itself, quiet artifacts of a shared experience. You pause near the western market gate, where a group of foreign merchants prepare their caravans for departure. A Sogdian trader tightens the straps of a leather pack, his blue glass beads packed carefully in linen. A Persian apothecary exchanges parting words with a Chinese herbalist, their conversation unhurried, their gestures almost ceremonial. They will travel westward when the city fully wakes, carrying with them not only goods but the memory of this luminous night. Each merchant is both participant and messenger, carrying fragments of Chang'an's glow to distant lands. Above, the first true streaks of dawn emerge, pale rose and soft gold. They touch the highest eaves of the city walls, then spill gradually into the streets. The remaining lanterns flicker stubbornly, small pockets of orange light against the encroaching day. One by one they gutter out, leaving only a faint wisp of smoke curling upward like a final prayer. In the quiet that follows, you feel the magnitude of what has passed. The Lantern Festival is more than entertainment. It is a delicate weaving of commerce, devotion, and community. For a single night, the barriers of class and distance softened. Scholar and laborer, foreign merchant and palace guard, all shared the same gentle glow. All walked the same stone streets under the same lantern moon. The festival's true power lies not in its brightness, but in the memory it leaves. A memory that lingers long after the flames have cooled. Consider the long reach of that memory. Centuries from now, poets will still write of lantern nights in Chang'an. Even when the dynasty itself has faded, archaeologists may unearth shards of porcelain or faint traces of pigment, puzzling over how such fragile beauty endured. Yet the festival's essence, its slow music, its mingling of strangers, its quiet joy, cannot be captured in artifacts. It lives instead in the imagination, a light that continues to glow whenever the story is told. As the final lantern near you dims, you feel the city settle into its daylight rhythm. Merchants head toward warehouses, scholars back to their scrolls, guards to their watch posts. The market returns to its practical form, a place of buying and selling, planning and record-keeping. But for those who walked beneath the paper moons, a subtle change remains. A reminder that even the most ordinary lives can be briefly illuminated by shared wonder. You step through the gate as the sun clears the horizon. The sky, once a canvas of flickering lanterns, now holds only the pale blue of early morning. Behind you, the city resumes its work. Ahead lies the steady flow of another Tang day. Yet a quiet question follows you into the sunlight, as persistent as the scent of sandalwood that clings to your sleeves. When the memory of a single night can outlast empires, what else in our own daily lives might shine, unnoticed, until time itself reveals its quiet glow? Picture the Han Empire in the 1st century BCE, a landscape vast enough to stretch from the humid deltas of the south to the wind-scoured deserts of the far west. Its rulers, determined to bind such distances together, built a web of posthouses, small, sturdy relay stations that dotted the imperial highways every few dozen li. These outposts rarely appear in heroic histories, yet they kept the empire breathing. Letters of command, grain tallies, diplomatic dispatches, and the occasional whispered intrigue all passed through their quiet courtyards. You begin your journey at dawn on the main trunk road leading from Chang'an toward the northwest frontier. The road itself is a feat of steady engineering. Tamped earth layered with gravel, wide enough for the two-wheeled courier carts that thunder along it. Morning mist hangs low, softening the ruts and the hoofprints of the previous day. Ahead, the outline of a post house emerges, a low compound of earthen walls and timber gates, its roof tiled in simple gray. Nothing about it seeks grandeur, but every beam and stone is placed for endurance. Step inside and meet the people who give this station its slow, dependable rhythm. The station master, or Chang, rises before first light. His hair is pulled into a knot held by a plain wooden pin, his robe belted with coarse hemp. He checks the night logs, written in neat brushstrokes by the clerk who served the late shift. Which couriers arrived, which left, which horses needed tending. His handwriting is careful, for every mark may later be reviewed by an inspector sent from the capital. Accuracy is his quiet pride. The smell of warm millet porridge drifts from the kitchen hut, where the cook ladles breakfast for the small staff. A young stable hand carries buckets of water from the well, his steps measured so as not to spill. Horses, essential to the empire's speed, nicker softly in their stalls. They are fed a ration of barley mixed with chopped straw, their coats brushed free of dust before the day's first riders appear. By mid-morning the first courier arrives, a lean man in government livery, his cart drawn by a pair of well-muscled bays. He carries a sealed packet bearing the red stamp of the central ministries. Without ceremony he dismounts, presents his credentials, and waits only long enough for the station clerk to record the time of arrival. A fresh team of horses is brought forth. The spent animals are led away for rest and feed. Within moments the courier is off again, wheels crunching over gravel, leaving only the faint smell of leather and sweat. Such transactions repeat with near-mechanical precision. The Han postal system is designed for speed and reliability, a lifeline that allows the emperor's will to travel hundreds of kilometers in a matter of days. Each post house is expected to keep horses ready at all hours, to maintain clear records of every dispatch, and to provide simple lodging for couriers when weather or injury demands a pause. For the keepers, the work is endless but rarely dramatic. The empire depends on diligence, not spectacle. Walk with the stable hands as they perform their quiet labor. They know each horse by the pattern of its whinny, the grain of its coat, the feel of its breath on a cold morning. They patch harnesses with strips of leather, mend cartwheels with wedges of pine, and keep a careful eye for lameness. No courier can afford a lame mount, and a delayed message might cost more than a night's sleep. Yet the rhythm is steady, not frantic. Every task is performed with the calm of long practice. Beyond the compound walls, the road stretches toward distant provinces. Couriers arrive from the west carrying reports from garrisons along the Silk Road. Others come from the fertile south, their packets heavy with grain levies and tax registers. Some carry diplomatic letters bound for kingdoms beyond the empire's nominal borders. Xiongnu chieftains, Central Asian city-states, or the distant land of Parthia. Though the keepers may never travel far, the world passes through their hands in wax-sealed envelopes. The post house serves more than official business. Occasional travelers, granted permits, find temporary shelter here. A scholar heading to an appointment in the capital might rest in the outer courtyard, exchanging quiet conversation with the clerk over cups of bitter tea. A widow returning to her native village may pause to share a simple meal of rice and pickled greens, grateful for a safe place to sleep. The station is not an inn, yet its walls offer a rare pocket of security on the long roads. As afternoon light slants across the yard, you sense the deeper patience of this place. Records are updated in the ledger room, where the faint scent of ink and pine smoke lingers. The clerk sharpens his brush and carefully notes the day's tallies, the number of horses exchanged, the weight of fodder consumed, the names of each courier. Bamboo slips are tied with hemp cord, to be inspected later by an official from the prefecture. The empire values such minutiae, believing that careful record-keeping sustains order across vast distances. Occasionally, the routine is broken by weather. A sudden sandstorm may sweep in from the western deserts, coating the compound in fine grit and forcing doors to stay barred. Or summer rains may flood the road, delaying riders and soaking supplies. In those moments, the keepers show another skill: endurance. They secure the stables, protect the fodder, and wait, knowing the empire's messages will resume their flow once the sky clears. As evening settles, lanterns are lit along the outer wall. Simple clay bowls filled with oil and wicks, nothing like the ornate lights of Chang'an's grand festivals. The compound quiets to a gentle hum. Horses breathe steadily in their stalls. The cook stirs a pot of millet and beans for the night meal. Beyond the gate, the road stretches into darkness. But inside, a small, steady glow promises continuity. You might wonder how such an unremarkable place could matter so much. Yet consider the fragility of connection in a world without telegraph or steam. A single missing dispatch could mean grain ships delayed, frontier troops left without orders, or an alliance misunderstood. The keepers of these post houses rarely receive praise, but their work underpins the authority of the Han state as surely as any grand decree. Somewhere in the night, a distant drum signals the change of watch. The station master inspects the gates one last time, his steps slow and deliberate. He knows that before dawn another courier will arrive, and the cycle will begin again. Horses swapped, records written, messages carried forward into the empire's vast expanse. You stand in the quiet yard, listening to the steady breathing of animals, the soft scrape of a clerk's brush across bamboo. The stars above are sharp and innumerable, their ancient light as constant as the road beneath your feet. You find yourself asking a question that lingers like the scent of pine smoke in the cool air. How many lives emperors, soldiers, scholars, and common folk depend on the silent efficiency of these uncelebrated keepers, and how many more will pass unrecorded, carried only in the faint memory of a courier's wheel? When you wake with the first light at the post house, the scent of damp earth lingers after a night of light rain. The compound's earthen walls have absorbed the moisture, darkening to a deeper brown. A thin curl of smoke rises from the kitchen hut as the cook stirs millet for breakfast, just as he did yesterday and the day before. The sameness is not monotony but a kind of anchor, the daily rhythm that holds the empire's communications steady. You notice the keepers are already at work. The stable hands move quietly among the horses, their robes tied high to keep from brushing the muddy ground. They speak little, words are reserved for necessary instructions. Each horse is inspected for stiffness in the joints, the hooves cleaned of stones. A traveling courier depends on these animals more than on any human guide, and the post house reputation rests on their health. The station master, the Tang, oversees it all with practiced calm. He carries a bamboo tally board where each incoming and outgoing courier is recorded. His handwriting is small and neat, almost elegant despite the utilitarian purpose. Years of repetition have given him a certain authority, not of force but of knowledge. He knows the habits of the couriers, the small quirks of their journeys, even the patterns of the wind along the road. His authority is invisible to most travelers, yet it keeps the station running as reliably as the sunrise. Throughout the morning, a variety of people drift in and out, all united by the road. A young courier from the southern provinces arrives first. His face is sun-darkened, his clothes marked by the dust of long travel. He carries a sealed bamboo tube bearing the emblem of the Ministry of Finance. He bows briefly to the Tang, exchanges a few practical words, and accepts a fresh team of horses without breaking stride. Within minutes he is gone, the clatter of hooves fading toward the next station. Later, a scholar on his way to take the imperial examinations arrives, weary and footsore. He is permitted to rest within the outer courtyard. His scroll case is tied with careful knots, and you imagine the hopeful essays and poems within each character a chance at a better life. Over a simple bowl of hot tea provided by the cook, he explains that he has been traveling for 2 months from the far south. His voice is soft, carrying both exhaustion and quiet determination. By evening he will be gone as well, just another soul passing through. The cook, a middle-aged woman with hair bound under a plain cloth, knows every flavor of such encounters. Her life is rooted in this post house, but her ears have traveled the empire many times over. Couriers, scholars, soldiers, all have sat at her small wooden table. She remembers fragments of their stories. A distant battle recounted in a whisper, a market festival described with a smile, a missing family member lamented in the pause between sips of tea. She gathers these fragments not as gossip but as quiet history, a collection of ordinary voices that the empire's official records will never note. As the day warms, a minor official from a nearby county arrives, carrying a wooden box of tax receipts bound with silk cord. He exchanges the required documents with the station clerk, who checks each seal and weight with patient care. The process is slow but deliberate. Accuracy matters more than speed when coin and grain levies are at stake. The official wipes his brow, compliments the cook on the faint aroma of ginger drifting from the kitchen, and departs before noon. Between arrivals, there is time to observe the small rituals of maintenance that sustain this place. The clerk mixes fresh ink from soot and pine resin, grinding it slowly on a stone until it reaches the right consistency. A stable boy braids hemp ropes to repair a frayed harness, his hands moving with automatic grace. Someone sweeps the courtyard of fallen leaves. These acts may appear trivial, but they create the foundation of trust that allows imperial orders to move unbroken across thousands of li. The post house is more than a node in a network. It is a meeting point of lives. A traveling monk stops briefly to ask for water, offering a quiet blessing before he continues. A pair of merchants carrying bolts of silk are delayed by a broken wheel and wait while a local carpenter repairs it. They speak softly of market prices and distant relatives. For a few hours, the station becomes a tiny village of strangers, united by the road and the need for rest. Outside the compound, the empire stirs with events grand and small. In Chang'an, scholars debate the policies of the emperor's advisors. Far to the west, soldiers patrol the edges of the Gobi Desert. Farmers in the southern rice fields bend over their crops, unaware that a decree about irrigation will soon pass through these very gates. Here, in this modest compound, the post house keepers touch those distant lives without ever seeing them. In the late afternoon, clouds gather again, carrying the scent of impending rain. The Chang orders the gates reinforced and the horses sheltered. He checks the grain bins to ensure there is enough fodder should the roads flood and couriers be forced to stay overnight. There is no drama in these preparations, only a quiet readiness learned over years of service. The empire trusts him to anticipate the unexpected. A courier finally arrives at dusk, soaked from the sudden downpour. His cloak is heavy with water, his hair plastered to his forehead. Yet his packet must continue. The station hands work with brisk efficiency, rubbing down the wet horses, exchanging them for dry mounts, and offering the courier a brief chance to warm himself by the brazier. Within minutes, he is gone again, a blurred figure in the gray evening, carrying news that will ripple outward long after he is out of sight. Night brings a different quiet. The rain softens to a steady rhythm on the tiled roofs. Lanterns flicker in the damp air. Inside, the staff eats their evening meal of millet, beans, and pickled vegetables, their conversation sparse but companionable. The Chang reads the day's records once more, his brush poised to correct even the smallest error. Accuracy is his devotion, the invisible thread tying his life to the empire's vast design. You may find yourself wondering how many generations have performed these same tasks. Before the Han, other dynasties relied on similar networks, and after the Han fall, others will build their own. The faces will change, but the rhythm will remain. The endless movement of messages, the steady care of animals, the careful strokes of ink on bamboo slips. Outside, the rain stops. A cool wind sweeps through the courtyard, carrying the faint scent of wet grass and distant mountains. The stars emerge once more, clear and cold. Tomorrow, more couriers will arrive, more horses will be exchanged, more records will be written. The empire will continue its vast conversation, and these keepers will remain its quiet custodians. Yet one question lingers as you listen to the last drops fall from the eaves. How much of history depends not on emperors or generals, but on those who never leave the margins, whose patient hands keep the world's messages moving, even as their own names fade into the endless ledger of time. Morning returns without ceremony. A pale streak of light touches the horizon as roosters crow in the scattered farmsteads beyond the post-house wall. Inside the compound, the smell of damp earth mingles with the faint scent of barley fodder. The world seems to wake slowly, but for the post-house keepers, the new day begins before the sun clears the hills. The Chang, steady as ever, reviews the night watch log. A courier arrived after midnight, he notes, bearing an urgent dispatch marked with the crimson seal of the Imperial Secretariat. The record shows that the messenger changed horses and departed in less than 10 minutes. A small victory of efficiency that will never be celebrated but will be quietly appreciated by someone many hundreds of li away. In the stable, the horses shift and nicker. A young boy named Rue, barely 12, checks their hooves, humming a tune that his grandmother taught him. For Rue, the post house is both school and playground. He has never seen the capital, never traveled beyond a day's ride in any direction. Yet he can name the provinces of the empire from the markings on courier uniforms and recite distances between stations as easily as another child might list the names of friends. His knowledge is shaped not by textbooks but by the endless traffic of the road. As the morning deepens, another courier arrives from the west, a faint layer of desert dust on his cloak. He brings reports from the frontier garrisons, where soldiers keep watch against the Xiongnu. His horse breathes heavily, sides damp with sweat. The station hands move with practiced speed. One leads the exhausted mount to water, another prepares a fresh team, while the clerk checks the seals on the courier's packets. No words are wasted. The message must continue its journey without delay. The empire's great movements often hinge on such quiet exchanges. A new edict on grain distribution may travel through these gates today, ensuring that a distant province receives relief before famine tightens its grip. A single missed dispatch could mean empty granaries and unrest. Yet the keepers rarely know the contents of the packets they handle. Their duty is to the system itself, not to the words it carries. Late in the morning, a traveling physician appears, requesting a brief rest and a cup of hot water to steep medicinal herbs. He carries a wooden case of powders and dried roots, their sharp aromas mingling with the scent of hay. As he sips his tea, he tells the cook of villages where fevers have spread after the recent floods. His voice is calm, but his eyes reveal the weight of countless patients. Soon he is on his way again, leaving only the faint trace of bitter herbs behind. Life at the post house is a tapestry of such fleeting encounters. Merchants with wagons full of tea bricks, soldiers carrying orders wrapped in oilskin, a weary mother with a sick child seeking temporary shelter. All pass through and vanish into the distance. The keepers remain, their own stories unwritten yet essential to the empire's endless conversation. The cook tends the midday meal, millet steamed to soft perfection, beans simmered with a hint of ginger. She has served this dish thousands of times, yet she takes quiet satisfaction in its reliability. Her food warms travelers, nourishes couriers, and sustains the staff who rarely leave the compound. In her careful stirring lies an unspoken devotion, a belief that simple, steady care can hold the world together. In the heat of afternoon, the road grows dusty and still. Cicadas sing from the trees beyond the walls. The Tang uses the lull to inspect the grain stores, counting each sack with methodical precision. Grain is the lifeblood of the horses, and therefore of the network itself. A miscalculation could ripple outward, slowing messages across provinces. His tally completed, he seals the ledger with a small, deliberate stroke of his brush. Toward evening, a sudden gust of wind carries the scent of distant rain. Lanterns are lit earlier than usual, their glow painting the courtyard in warm amber. The clerk sharpens his brush and prepares fresh bamboo slips. Soon the next courier arrives, bringing news from the capital. His uniform is spattered with mud from the previous night's storms, yet his manner is composed. He drinks quickly from a ladle of well water, exchanges his mount, and vanishes into the dusk as swiftly as he came. Night descends with a hush that seems almost reverent. The staff gathers for their final meal, a quiet circle in the lantern glow. They share modest stories of the day, of the merchant's broken wheel, the physician's herbal remedies, the odd pattern of migrating birds they noticed at dusk. These are not grand tales, yet in their smallness lies a certain permanence, as if the post house itself listens and remembers. When the gates are finally barred, the Tang takes one last walk along the perimeter. He pauses to watch the stars, their cold light mirrored in the still water of the courtyard well. He knows that in a few hours, another courier may arrive, rousing the station from its fragile rest. There is no true ending here, only the steady pulse of duty. Perhaps you wonder what becomes of these keepers when dynasties fall and roads change course. History rarely records their names. When the Han eventually give way to new rulers, some stations will crumble, their timbers repurposed, their courtyards reclaimed by grass. Yet the idea of them, the quiet nodes of connection, the people who keep the world's messages moving, will endure. Future dynasties will build their own networks, staffed by other unsung keepers who rise before dawn and measure their worth in the smooth passage of words. As you stand in the silent courtyard, the night air cool against your face, you may feel the faint vibration of a distant hoofbeat traveling along the road. It is the sound of continuity, of messages crossing mountains and deserts, of lives linked by unremarkable labor. No single courier, no single keeper is remembered, but together they form the hidden spine of an empire. The stars will slowly overhead. The horses breathe steadily in their stalls. The cook extinguishes the last lantern. In the quiet that follows, you are left with a question that lingers longer than any decree or dispatch. How many empires, how many ages, have depended on people who ask for nothing more than a stable roof, a ledger balanced, and the certainty that their silent work keeps the world connected long after their own footsteps have faded from the road? Imagine yourself stepping into Chang'an, the great Tang capital, on the 15th night of the first lunar month. The year could be any during the dynasty's long prosperity. Perhaps 740, when poets roamed the avenues and traders arrived from every horizon. The Lantern Festival marks the final evening of the New Year celebrations, and tonight the city intends to outshine the stars. The city plan itself invites exploration. Broad avenues cut straight lines between massive gate towers, while high walls encircle entire wards like patient sentinels. At night, the usual curfew lifts. Tonight, no drum will sound to drive citizens indoors. Instead, people stream through the great Vermilion Bird Gate, their footsteps quickened by anticipation. From every quarter, families, scholars, merchants, and monks mingle, their voices blending into a soft tide of sound. Lanterns are the evening's true citizens. They bloom everywhere, hanging from eaves, strung across alleys, balanced in the hands of children. Each flame is a small sun wrapped in paper or silk. Some lanterns are plain cylinders painted with poems in delicate brushwork. Others are elaborate sculptures. Dragons with eyes that flicker red, lotus blossoms glowing like captured moonlight, carp that seem ready to leap from their wooden perches. Oil wicks burn steadily inside, their light flickering with the movement of the crowd. Vendors prepare for this night for weeks. You follow the scent of sesame cakes crisping on hot griddles, then the sharp sweetness of candied hawthorn skewers. A woman stirs a copper pot of fermented rice wine, its steam carrying a faint fragrance of plum. Children tug at their parents' sleeves, eager for treats. Sugar figurines shaped into horses, tiny paper kites to catch the warm night air. No one rushes. The evening is a slow river of delights, meant to be savored. Along the main avenue, government buildings stand solemnly behind their high gates, but even officials cannot resist the festival spell. In some courtyards, carefully regulated displays present colossal lantern structures several stories tall, crafted by palace artisans. One tower depicts a mountain range with hidden niches where tiny mechanical birds flap their wings when a hidden gear is turned. The engineering is subtle, the effect quietly mesmerizing. You pause at a side street where musicians have gathered. The sound of the pipa, a four-stringed lute, floats above the chatter. Beside it, the soft beat of a small drum marks time for dancers who sway with practiced grace. The music is not loud or hurried. It invites listeners to linger, to breathe, to let the evening unfold. Elderly men lean on canes and nod to the rhythm. Children mimic the dancers' steps, their laughter bright as the lanterns. Monks from distant Buddhist monasteries join the crowd, carrying lanterns shaped like lotus flowers, symbols of enlightenment. Their robes catch the glow as they move, unhurried, among merchants from Persia, sailors from the South Seas, and travelers from the Korean peninsula. Chang'an at this time is the center of a world both vast and intimate. A single street may host half a dozen languages. Yet tonight everyone shares the same light. The festival is more than decoration. For many, It carries quiet prayers, wishes for good harvests, for safe journeys, for the well-being of distant relatives. Couples tie small slips of paper to lantern frames, inscribed with hopes that only the wind will read. Children guess riddles written on lanterns, their voices rising in soft triumph when they solve a clever pun. These acts, though playful, weave a fabric of communal belief as tangible as the silk banners overhead. As the night deepens, the city glows as though a second dawn has arrived. From a hill outside the southern gate, you look back to see Chang'an shimmering. The ordered grid of avenues appears as a map of stars reversed upon the earth. Smoke from countless lamps drifts upward, joining the true constellations in a quiet mingling of light. Somewhere a poet composes a verse, brush moving steadily across paper. A record of brightness destined to fade when the lamps are extinguished. Yet even amidst this brilliance, the festival keeps a gentle pace. There is no urgency, no clamor of fireworks to shatter the air. Instead, you hear the steady murmur of footsteps, the low hum of conversation, the occasional call of a vendor advertising sweet rice cakes. The brightness is dazzling but not harsh. It soothes as much as it dazzles, encouraging the heart to settle even as the eyes wander. By midnight, the crowd has thinned slightly, though lanterns still sway in the soft breeze. Families begin the slow walk home, their children sleepy but unwilling to relinquish the evening. Merchants douse their cooking fires. Musicians pack their instruments. Yet the city remains aglow, as if reluctant to admit the night will end. You linger, watching a solitary lantern drift upward. Someone has released it to the sky, its small flame carrying a private wish into the darkness. The wind takes it higher until it joins the stars, a quiet point of light among countless others. As you stand beneath this glowing canopy, a thought settles like ash from a distant fire. How many such nights have passed, their light forgotten except in a few fragile poems, and what small hopes, tied to paper and flame, still travel unseen among the stars, waiting to be remembered? Before the lanterns ever light the capital, months of quiet work unfold behind shuttered doors and open courtyards. To understand the festival's glow, you must walk backward through its preparation, into the slow rhythm of Tang artisans whose steady hands give the night its radiance. In a modest lane near the West Market, the papermaker rises long before dawn. His workshop smells faintly of mulberry bark and rice paste. He soaks the softened bark overnight, then pounds it into a milky pulp with a wooden mallet whose handle bears the polish of decades. The pulp is strained and spread across a fine bamboo screen, each sheet lifted with careful wrists so the fibers dry evenly in the morning sun. This paper must be strong yet translucent, able to hold color and light without tearing. He works in patient silence, aware that a single flaw, a careless bubble, an uneven edge, might mar a lantern destined for the Palace Avenue. A few streets away, the silk dyer tends vats of indigo and saffron. Steam drifts upward, carrying scents of mineral salts and heated water. She lowers lengths of silk into the dye with a slow, circular motion, watching as color seeps into every thread. The cloth will later sheath lantern frames shaped like phoenixes, lotus blossoms, or the rare white deer. The dyer hums a tune learned from her grandmother. Her fingers stained a faint blue that even the strongest soap will not fully remove. The carpenters who build the delicate wooden frames work in a courtyard shaded by persimmon trees. Thin strips of bamboo are split, bent, and joined with precise knots of silk cord. For grand displays, towering lantern pagodas with hidden gears, they fashion hidden joints that allow sections to rotate or birds to flap gently in imitation of life. They speak little as they shave and plane, their minds measuring balance and weight. When dusk falls, the faint scent of sawdust lingers like a quiet promise. Oil merchants play their part as well. Sesame oil, prized for its steady flame, arrives in clay jars sealed with wax. They test each batch by the clarity of its burn, rejecting anything that smokes too heavily. A clean, calm flame is as much an art as a recipe. Without it, even the most exquisite paper and silk would fail to shine. Weeks before the festival, guild leaders meet in tea shops to assign spaces along the great avenues. They bargain politely, balancing tradition with novelty. Some families have held the same spot for generations, selling candied fruits or fragrant teas beneath lantern strings. Others bring new entertainments. A troupe of storytellers from the south, a Persian musician with a reed flute, a craftsman who claims he can make a lantern in the shape of a moving carp. The negotiations are slow, marked by deliberate sips of tea and long pauses. Every decision will shape the city's mood when the full moon rises. Meanwhile, ordinary residents prepare their own humble lights. A mother shows her daughter how to cut paper petals for a simple lotus lantern, fingers guiding the small hands through folds and gentle glue. A scholar selects a riddle to paint across his lamp, imagining neighbors puzzling over the answer. Even servants of the wealthy carve small turnip lanterns, hollowing the vegetables with quiet care. In every household, the making of light becomes a shared anticipation. As the festival approaches, the city subtly changes. Workshops stay open late, their doors spilling lamplight onto the street. The clang of carpenters' tools blends with the low rhythm of drums from distant rehearsal halls. Market stalls overflow with extra rice, sesame, and dried fruits, ready for the evening crowds. Officials circulate to check fire regulations, their serious expressions at odds with the excitement humming beneath the surface. The night before the festival, Chang'an holds its breath. Merchants stack bundles of paper and silk. Children polish their small lantern frames. The moon, nearly full, hangs like a pale rehearsal of the spectacle to come. Lantern poles are raised across the avenues, ropes stretched between gate towers, every knot tested for strength. In the great southern square, palace artisans assemble an immense display. A mountain scene where tiny wooden cranes will flap their wings when hidden wheels turn, each movement powered by quiet ingenuity. Finally, the evening arrives. As dusk settles, the artisans light their first wicks. Flames catch with a soft hiss, paper and silk warming to life. Street by street, the city blooms in gentle stages, like a field of flowers opening at twilight. Children run ahead of their parents, lanterns bobbing in the gathering dark. Neighbors exchange greetings, admiring the craftsmanship, noting clever riddles, and complimenting the scent of sesame oil drifting from food stalls. You move through this glow at an unhurried pace, noticing details easily missed in the larger spectacle. The papermaker stands near a small bridge, holding a lantern of his own, a simple cylinder brushed with a single line of poetry. He watches the passing crowd with quiet satisfaction, his day's labor now luminous in 1,000 forms. Across the way, the silk dyer smiles as a tower of deep indigo and gold shimmers against the night sky, her handiwork transformed by firelight. Musicians tune their instruments. The crisp pluck of the pipa, the breathy call of a bamboo flute. Storytellers gather children around a low stage, their voices rising and falling in practiced cadence. The crowd listens not with restless excitement but with a shared, almost meditative attention. Even the smallest details, lantern reflections rippling in a drainage canal, the faint crackle of oil wicks, seem to hold meaning. As the evening deepens, you sense the hidden hours behind every flicker of light. Each glow is the echo of countless steady movements. Pounding mulberry bark, bending bamboo, stirring dye, grinding ink. The festival's calm splendor is born of patient craft, a reminder that brilliance is often the final step in a long, quiet process. Somewhere above the rooftops, a breeze stirs and carries the warm smell of sesame cakes and candle smoke. A single lantern, released by unseen hands, floats upward, its flame unwavering. You watch it join the high moon, and a thought lingers like a soft question. How many of these delicate lights carry the memory of their makers, people whose names fade like ink in rain, yet whose careful work still drifts among the stars long after the last lantern has burned out. The festival's full moon hangs over Chang'an like a silver coin, washing the great city in a gentle glow that mingles with the countless lanterns below. The capital has become a sea of warm light and quiet delight, each flicker of flame reflecting centuries of custom and the patient effort of artisans and neighbors. Tonight is the high point of the first lunar month, when the Tang court and the common streets breathe together in the same luminous rhythm. You join the crowd on Vermilion Bird Avenue, the grand boulevard that cuts through the southern quarter. It is wider than any street you have known, wide enough for 10 horse carts abreast, and tonight every span is hung with ribbons of lanterns. Near the towering gates, the great palace displays dominate. Enormous wooden pagodas cloaked in red and gold silk, their tiers alive with hidden gears. As music rises from the imperial band, the pagodas slowly turn. Painted cranes lift their wings, and wooden carps swim in suspended circles, propelled by clever axles. Children press forward, eyes wide, as though they have glimpsed the inside of a dream. Further along, vendors arrange their own modest wonders. A farmer from the outskirts sells paper rabbits that hop when warmed by candle heat. A family from Sogdiana offers spiced walnuts wrapped in thin sheets of honeyed dough. Tea sellers pour fragrant cups of jasmine infusion, the steam carrying a sweetness that blends with sesame smoke. There is no urgency in the exchange of coins. The festival belongs to time itself, unhurried and endless for as long as the lamps endure. Everywhere you turn, riddles invite the curious. On a bridge rail, a lantern glows with these characters. I have no mouth yet speak. I have no ears yet hear. A group of scholars lean in, whispering guesses. Perhaps an echo, perhaps the wind, until one smiles and writes the answer in quick strokes on a scrap of paper. The crowd nods in quiet appreciation, more pleased by the play of thought than by any prize. The emperor, though distant, is felt in every shimmer. It was his decree that opened the palace avenues to common folk on this night, an act of both political grace and genuine enjoyment. Courtiers mingle with townspeople in plain robes, their silks hidden beneath simpler cloth. For a few hours, the boundaries of rank soften, replaced by the shared wonder of light. Listen closely and you hear layers of sound. The soft boom of drums from a distant troop, the bright notes of a pipa echoing from a pavilion, the hum of thousands of conversations blending into a single lullaby. There is laughter, yes, but it is muted, as if everyone senses the fragile beauty of the moment and fears to break it. Walk toward the northern canal and you find the water transformed into a mirror of stars. Families launch small floating lamps shaped like lotus blossoms, each bearing a quiet wish. For good harvests, for health, for a child yet to be born. The flickering petals drift downstream, carrying hopes into the dark beyond the city walls. A breeze stirs and some lamps cluster together, their combined light forming fleeting constellations that dissolve as quickly as they appear. Midnight approaches, but the festival does not falter. Lanterns sway in the night air, their paper skins glowing against the deep indigo sky. A troupe of acrobats performs beneath a high arch, their shadows stretching like graceful birds across the crowd. You pause, aware of how the smallest movements, the flick of a wrist, the tilt of a flame, compose the quiet grandeur of the evening. And yet, as the moon begins its slow descent, a different rhythm takes hold. Lanterns burn lower, oil wicks shorten. Merchants begin to pack away unsold treats, their voices soft and content. Children, heavy-eyed, lean against their parents' shoulders, their lanterns still glowing faintly. A gentle hush spreads through the avenues as if the city itself prepares for rest. Eventually, the imperial musicians play a final, lingering note. It floats over the rooftops, a sound that feels less like an ending than a sigh. One by one, the grand palace lanterns are extinguished. The towering pagodas darken, revealing the pale moon once more. The crowd thins, footsteps fading into the sleeping quarters of the city. You walk homeward through quiet streets where only a few stubborn lights remain. In the distance, a paper crane lantern still turns in a private courtyard, its wings catching the faintest breath of wind. A small boy, perhaps too excited to sleep, watches it from a doorway, his face lit by the gentle flame. The sight lingers, an afterimage of all the evening's beauty distilled into a single, private glow. By dawn, Chang'an will look unchanged. The broad avenues will return to their ordinary routines. Merchants arranging bolts of cloth, scholars hurrying to examinations, farmers driving carts of winter vegetables to market. Yet something of the night remains, ashes of sesame wicks on the stones, a faint perfume of silk and smoke, a memory shared by thousands. The festival is both fleeting and eternal, a ritual that returns each year but never in quite the same way. You might wonder, as the sky pales to gray, how many such nights have come and gone unnoticed by history's grand chronicles. The names of emperors and generals fill the scrolls, but the patient work of lantern makers, the quiet laughter of families by the canal, the whispered riddles under paper moons, these moments seldom earn a record. And yet, they shape the heartbeat of a civilization as surely as any battle or decree. As the first rays of morning light spill over the city walls, the last few lanterns flicker and fade. The mulberry paper curls inward, the bamboo frames collapse softly, and the smoke rises straight into the brightening sky. For a breath, the fragrance of burned oil and singed silk lingers like a half-remembered dream. Perhaps, when night falls again, you will recall the feeling. The way 1,000 small flames once held a city in gentle suspension between earth and moon. You might ask yourself a quiet question as you drift towards sleep. When the lights of our own age have dimmed and the noise of progress has faded, will someone far in the future remember the calm glow of our evenings, the small acts of craft and care that once illuminated the dark? Before the age of steamships and steel hulls, before global trade could be mapped with exact lines on paper, the Indian Ocean was already a vast and living network. Its winds and currents, shifting with the seasons, carried cinnamon and cardamom, pearls and porcelain, stories and songs. To sail its waters was to trust the rhythm of the monsoon, a patient pact between sea and sky that merchants learned to read like scripture. Imagine standing at the harbor of Calicut in the early 12th century, when the first light of day brushes the horizon with pale silver. The air is soft with salt and the faint spice of drying peppercorns. Fishing boats bob near the shore, their nets dripping from the night's labor. Beyond them, larger vessels, the sturdy dhows, rock gently at anchor, their high prows carved with abstract patterns meant to please both traders and the sea spirits who watch from below. Dockworkers begin their quiet routine. They carry bundles of dried coconut husks for rope making, jars of ghee for provisions, and heavy sacks of black pepper that have drawn sailors here from distant coasts. A shipmaster examines the knots of his rigging, running calloused fingers along the thick palm fiber ropes. He has timed his departure to the southwest monsoon, the dependable wind that will carry his cargo across the wide bay toward the Red Sea. The monsoon is not merely weather. It is the great calendar of this ocean. For half the year, steady winds blow from the southwest, guiding vessels toward Arabia and the African coast. When the season turns, the northeast monsoon carries them back to India and the Spice Islands of the east. Merchants plan entire lifetimes around these shifting breezes. A misjudged departure might mean months of waiting in a foreign port, living on credit and hope. Walk further along the wharf and you will hear a mixture of tongues. Malayalam from local traders, Arabic from Omani merchants, Swahili from visitors of the East African coast, and even fragments of Mandarin from emissaries of the distant Song Dynasty. Calicut thrives on this diversity. In its markets you can taste dates from Oman, sugar from Bengal, and dried fish from the Maldives, each item carrying a whisper of its homeland. The sailors who make these journeys live by habits shaped over centuries. They study the night sky for guidance, following constellations like the Southern Cross and the curved hook of the Scorpion. They note the color of the sea, the scent of rain on distant winds, and the flight of birds that signal the nearness of land. Navigation here is an art of patience and careful memory, passed from master to apprentice in quiet instruction rather than written treatise. Board one of the dhows in your mind. Its hull is stitched together with coconut fiber rather than nailed, a technique that allows the wood to flex with the swells. The deck smells of tar and dried fish. Amphorae of fresh water are lashed to the railings, and small clay stoves for cooking are secured in the lee of the mast. The crew will eat sparingly. Rice boiled in seawater, lentils spiced with a pinch of the very pepper they transport. As the sun climbs, the market awakens fully. Spice brokers unfurl their goods beneath wide awnings. Neat cones of turmeric, baskets of nutmeg and mace, coils of cinnamon bark. Their colors are subdued yet rich, from deep amber to dark brown, each with a fragrance that lingers in the humid air. A buyer from Aden inspects a shipment of cardamom, rolling a single pod between thumb and forefinger before nodding his approval. The exchange is wordless. A glance and a small gesture are enough to confirm the price. Not all trade is precious or exotic. Alongside the spices, merchants barter for rice, coconut oil, cotton cloth, and simple earthenware pots. Everyday necessities cross these waters as steadily as rare luxuries, ensuring that distant communities remain connected by more than just wealth. A woman from a nearby village delivers baskets of dried fish for export to the Maldives, where such fish are valued for their flavor in curry. She carries herself with the quiet confidence of someone whose livelihood is secure in the ancient rhythm of tide and trade. The ocean itself seems unhurried, but beneath its surface lies a network as complex as any city street. Coral reefs protect small islands where sailors can rest and refill their water jars. Hidden currents speed or slow a voyage by unseen degrees. Mariners speak of places where the sea hums softly at night, a sound born of shifting sand and tidal pulse. These are not myths but small truths of the Indian Ocean, known to those who spend their lives upon it. As evening approaches, preparations for departure quicken. The captain checks his star chart, though he will rely mostly on the wind's touch and the feel of the waves. Crew members load the final sacks of pepper and bundles of areca nuts. The ship's clerk, an elderly man with a neatly trimmed beard, tallies each item with a reed pen on palm leaf scrolls. His records will travel as far as the cargo, ensuring that debts are honored and partnerships maintained across thousands of miles. You stand at the edge of the pier as the sun sinks low. The dhows begin to slip from their moorings, sails catching the first steady breath of the southwest wind. The air fills with the creak of ropes, the slap of water against hulls, the muted calls of sailors. Slowly, the vessels turn toward the open sea, their triangular lateen sails glowing amber in the fading light. They will be gone for months, perhaps a year, yet their return is as certain as the monsoon itself. The harbor quiets after their departure. Lanterns flicker to life along the waterfront, casting long reflections on the gentle waves. A soft breeze carries the mingled scents of pepper, salt, and wood smoke. In the distance, you can almost see the silhouettes of the departing ships, small against the vast horizon. They seem to move not only across space but across centuries, their journey a thread in the endless tapestry of ocean trade. As night settles, the stars emerge, points of silver that once guided sailors long before compasses found their place in the world. The sea breathes in slow, steady rhythm, a reminder that human commerce, for all its ambition, remains bound to the patient turning of earth and sky. And you may wonder, as you watch the lights of the harbor fade into quiet, how many of these voyages ended not in the ports they sought but in stories carried by wind and water. How many spices reached their destination, and how many sank to rest on the ocean floor, leaving only a faint perfume for passing fish. The monsoon will return, and with it the ships. But tonight, the Indian Ocean belongs to the dark and to the memory of all those who trusted its endless path. As the southwest monsoon carries merchant ships westward, the Indian Ocean itself becomes a moving marketplace. To follow their path is to trace a ring of harbors, each a resting point, each alive with the distinct rhythms of its coast. The journey is not only about spices or profit. It is a long conversation among cultures, spoken in dozens of tongues and gestures, repeated for centuries until it shapes the very world it touches. Your mind drifts first to Aden, the great port at the mouth of the Red Sea. Here, mountains of bare rock rise steeply from a deep natural harbor. Sailors arriving after weeks on the open sea find fresh water in cisterns carved into the volcanic hills. The bazaar stretches along narrow lanes where traders from Egypt, Persia, and the African interior barter side by side. You hear Arabic recitations of poetry mingle with the clatter of bronze weights on merchant scales. Pepper from the Malabar coast is measured out by the handful, destined for Cairo and beyond. Nearby, frankincense from Oman perfumes the air, its resinous smoke curling in lazy spirals. From Aden, some ships turn north toward Jeddah and the holy cities, their holds heavy with spices and fine textiles. Others strike west across the narrow sea to the African coast, where the Swahili city-states wait like polished pearls along a necklace of coral reefs. Kilwa, Mombasa, and Zanzibar each offer their own welcome. In Kilwa's harbor, stone houses built of coral lime stand bright against the blue water. Here the merchants speak a lilting mix of Bantu and Arabic, a language shaped by centuries of exchange. Gold from the interior of Africa arrives in caravans, along with ivory and mangrove timber, meeting Indian cottons and Chinese porcelain in a quiet equilibrium of trade. Sail farther south and you may find Sofala, where the Zambezi River meets the ocean. Its traders handle gold from the hinterlands and prize tortoiseshell for distant markets. Children watch the foreign ships with open curiosity, their eyes reflecting sails from half a world away. Women spread palm mats where cloves and coconuts dry in the sun, the scent of the harvest carried inland by a soft breeze. Eastward, the circle of commerce extends to the islands of the Maldives. These low coral atolls seem fragile against the endless sea, yet their waters yield cowrie shells prized as currency from Africa to China. Fishermen return at dusk with boats heavy with tuna, their families waiting on the white sand beaches. Here sailors find a different pace, a place to mend sails, to trade rice for fish, to let the steady hiss of surf erase the fatigue of long voyages. Continue across the Bay of Bengal and the Straits of Malacca lead you toward the bustling markets of Southeast Asia. In Srivijaya, near present-day Palembang, Buddhist monks chant beneath towering stupas while merchants from Java, Sumatra, and distant China debate the value of camphor and sandalwood. The smell of clove and nutmeg drifts from the east, carried by small island traders who have harvested these spices for generations. Their journeys are shorter than the ocean crossings, but their knowledge of hidden reefs and shifting tides is equally essential. All along these routes, the ocean is both boundary and bridge. No single empire rules the Indian Ocean for long. Instead, a quiet balance persists, maintained by mutual dependence and the shared need for safe passage. Merchant guilds from Gujarat, Arab ship captains, Malay sailors, and African navigators learn each other's customs not as conquest but as necessity. A sailor might know how to greet a Somali elder, how to bow before a Javanese shrine, and how to bargain with a Tamil spice broker, all without sharing a common alphabet. Consider the humble peppercorn at the heart of this network. Grown in the humid gardens of India's Malabar coast, it travels west to flavor the kitchens of Cairo, Constantinople, and Venice. Along the way it is handled by dozens of hands, each leaving a faint mark. The porter who loads it into a dhow, the broker who tallies its weight in Aden, the caravan driver who carries it across desert sands. Its journey is unremarkable in any single stage, but together these steps bind continents. Porcelain follows a similar path, though in reverse. Kilns in the Chinese provinces of Fujian and Jiangxi fire bowls of delicate blue and white glaze. Packed carefully in straw, these bowls travel to the Malay ports, across to India, up the Red Sea, and into Mediterranean markets where they become treasures of noble households. A broken shard of such porcelain, buried in East African soil, might lie quiet for centuries before a modern archaeologist brushes it free, proof of a world long connected by water. The ocean itself teaches patience. A captain knows that the same wind that speeds him west will later bring him home, but only if he waits for the season to turn. Months may pass in a foreign port. During that time, sailors learn new songs, adopt foreign spices in their cooking, and sometimes marry across cultures, leaving descendants who embody the routes themselves. Many coastal communities of the Indian Ocean, whether in Oman, Kerala, or the Swahili coast, still show the mingling of faces and traditions born of these long pauses. In Calicut, the cycle continues. While some ships sail out on the southwest winds, others return on the northeast monsoon. Their decks are heavy with Arabian horses prized by Indian rulers, with dates and dried limes, with the rough gold dust of African rivers. Dockworkers cheer the returning captains, their greetings warm but unhurried. They know the pattern: departure, absence, return, and preparation to depart again. The ocean demands no haste, only fidelity to its enduring rhythm. As night falls across this immense ring of water, think of how these journeys knit together places that have never met by land. A weaver in inland China uses Maldivian cowries as money. A cook in Cairo grinds Indian cinnamon for a winter stew. A mason in Kilwa drinks tea sweetened with jaggery from Bengal. None of them will see the entire network, yet each is sustained by it. Stand on a quiet pier at dusk and you may hear echoes of many languages, carried on the same breeze that ripples the lanterns along the quay. The words blur together: greetings, bargains, lullabies, until they become a single oceanic murmur. It is not the speech of any one nation but the shared voice of trade, as steady and unhurried as the tide. And as the stars emerge, guiding sailors once more across the dark water, a question lingers like a faint salt haze. How many lives, how many small choices and steady hands keep this vast network alive, when no empire claims it and no map can contain it? By the time the northeast monsoon arrives, the Indian Ocean seems to draw a slow, deliberate breath inward. The same winds that once carried ships west now fill their lateen sails in reverse, bringing merchants and sailors homeward. Yet each return carries something more than pepper or porcelain. It brings memories, ideas, and quiet transformations that seep into every port and household along the rim of the sea. Imagine a returning dhow easing into the harbor of Calicut just after dawn. Its hull is dark with months of salt and sun. Children run to the pier, shouting greetings as sailors toss coils of rope to the dockworkers below. The ship's clerk, eyes tired but alert, tallies each crate of frankincense, each bundle of Arabian dates, each gleaming porcelain bowl from the Far East. He notes the small losses: a jar cracked in heavy weather, a sack of cloves spoiled by damp, and records them with steady strokes of his reed pen. Nothing about his manner hints at the adventure behind those lines of figures. Families who waited through the long season now welcome fathers and brothers. A sailor embraces a child who has grown taller during his absence. A wife presents a garland of jasmine, its fragrance mixing with the sharper scent of sea and spice. Reunions unfold quietly, without spectacle, as if the ocean's long patience has taught them that true celebration needs no noise. These homecomings ripple outward. With each ship come unfamiliar accents, recipes, and fragments of stories. A merchant from Aden tells of a new mosque built near the harbor there. A sailor from Kilwa hums a Swahili melody that will be echoed in local markets for weeks to come. Children listen, their imaginations stirred by visions of coral cities and golden deserts. Without formal decree, the culture of the ocean seeps into daily life. In the kitchens of Kerala, cooks experiment with flavors carried across the sea. They blend coconut milk with dried limes from Oman, add a hint of clove from Zanzibar to rice dishes once seasoned only with local pepper. Fishermen mend their nets with rope learned from Maldivian neighbors. Weavers adopt patterns seen on cloth from Java. What begins as practical borrowing becomes tradition, woven so deeply that its foreign origin is soon forgotten. Religion, too, travels these waters. Muslim traders introduce the call to prayer to distant shores, not through conquest but through the quiet rhythm of commerce and neighborly exchange. Buddhist monks sail from Sri Lanka to teach in Southeast Asian ports, carrying manuscripts rolled in oilskin. Hindu festivals absorb music and instruments from far coasts. The ocean is no missionary, yet it spreads belief as naturally as it spreads tide and trade. Even the idea of time changes. Merchants no longer measure their lives by local harvests alone, but by the turning of the monsoon. Contracts are timed to winds. Marriages await the return of ships. A year becomes not simply 12 moons but a full circuit of the ocean's breath. Out with the southwest, home with the northeast. In this way, the sea quietly rewrites the calendar of countless communities. Far beyond the harbors, the effects of this commerce are felt. Gold from the African interior funds grand buildings in Cairo and Damascus. Chinese porcelain becomes a symbol of refinement in Persian courts. The peppercorn, so small it can rest unnoticed in a palm, alters the diet and economy of Europe centuries before European explorers will seek its source. Empires rise and decline, but the ocean's network endures, resilient precisely because no single power controls it. Consider the sailors themselves, the quiet backbone of this exchange. Many will spend their lives circling the ocean without ever calling a single place home. They form a society both transient and enduring, bound not by land but by shared knowledge of stars and currents. A captain from Gujarat may trust his vessel to a navigator from Oman, his crew a mix of Africans, Malays, and Indians. They speak in a patchwork of languages and signs, a floating community that dissolves and reforms with each voyage. Archaeologists today uncover fragments of their passage. Shards of Chinese ceramics in East African soil, Indian beads in Arabian sands, African ivory in temples far inland in China. Each object is a whisper of a journey once thought ordinary by those who made it. They are not treasures of kings but traces of everyday commerce, the very stuff of life carried patiently across an immense blue expanse. As centuries pass, the Indian Ocean continues its quiet work. Even when European ships armed with cannon appear on the horizon, the old routes persist beneath the new power. Local sailors know reefs and winds that no foreign map can capture. They guide newcomers as pilots, teach them when to depart and where to find safe anchor. The rhythm of the monsoon cannot be hurried, and even empires must bend to its pulse. Stand again at Calicut's pier, now under the soft glow of evening. The day's trade has ended. The market stalls are shuttered. You hear only the hush of waves and the faint creak of a resting ship. The air carries a faint perfume of pepper and salt, the smell of centuries layered one upon another. The scene is not dramatic, yet it holds the entire story of the ocean. The patience of sailors, the diligence of clerks, the countless quiet exchanges that bound 3 continents long before the word global was spoken. Perhaps you think of a single spice jar on a kitchen shelf, its contents ground into tonight's meal. Behind that jar stretches a lineage of wind and water, of men and women who read the stars and trusted the sea. Their names are mostly lost, but their work lingers in every grain, every taste, every gentle scent of clove or cinnamon that drifts through the air. As darkness settles and the tide draws in, the Indian Ocean lies calm, as if resting after another season of ceaseless travel. You may find yourself wondering, when future generations hold a fragment of our present, an object we consider ordinary, will they hear the echo of the countless small lives that shaped it, just as we now hear the ocean's quiet stories in every spice? Long before the jungle reclaimed it, Angkor rose from the Cambodian plain like a vision of eternity. Its towers of sandstone and laterite shimmered in the heat, carved with endless patterns of dancing apsaras, lotus petals, and celestial chariots. To the kings who ordered its construction, the city was more than a capital. It was the earthly reflection of the divine mountain Meru, a center where heaven and earth briefly touched. Yet the splendor that draws visitors today began with patient, uncelebrated labor. Picture the first light of dawn over the Tunnel Sap Lake, when the sky takes on a pale silver and the air is thick with the scent of damp earth. Along the banks, small boats drift silently, fishermen hauling in their morning catch. Beyond the water, dense forest stretches toward the horizon, concealing the vast temple complex that was once the heart of the Khmer Empire. Birds stir in the high branches, their calls echoing softly across the stillness. In this gentle hour, workers of the 12th century are already awake. Stonecutters gather at quarries miles away from the temple site, their hands rough from years of chiseling sandstone blocks. These men and women, often villagers conscripted for royal service, live in temporary camps at the quarry's edge. They begin their day with a simple meal of rice and fish, then set to work using iron chisels and wooden wedges. Each strike of the hammer sends a shiver through the stone, a sound that blends with the distant calls of gibbons in the forest canopy. The sandstone itself is patient but demanding. To free a single block, workers drive dry wooden wedges into natural cracks, then soak the wedges with water. As the wood swells, the rock yields with a quiet crack, releasing a block that may weigh several tons. Ropes of woven palm fiber are looped around the stone, and a team of men haul it onto a sled of bamboo and wood. From there, oxen or elephants will drag it toward the construction site along muddy tracks that glisten in the morning sun. Farther along the route, a small flotilla of rafts waits at the edge of a canal dug solely for this purpose. Khmer engineers, masters of water management, have extended a web of canals and reservoirs across the landscape. The blocks are loaded onto the rafts, which glide slowly through the water, guided by poles and the steady rhythm of paddles. It is easier to float stone than to drag it, and the people of Angkor understand that water, not brute strength, is the true ally of builders. Arriving at the construction site, the stones meet a new chorus of activity. Scaffoldings of bamboo rise around the unfinished towers. Teams of masons position each block with remarkable precision, fitting stone to stone without mortar. They use levers of hardwood and simple rope pulleys, adjusting and readjusting until the seams disappear into near perfection. Young apprentices watch closely, learning the feel of a balanced stone, the subtle sound that tells when a block is set correctly. Nearby, carvers prepare the surfaces that will one day tell stories of gods and kings. Their chisels sketch the outlines of epic battles, heavenly dancers, and endless floral motifs. The work is slow, almost meditative. A single lintel may take months to complete, every curve polished until it catches the sunlight like flowing water. The carver's songs, soft melodies in the Khmer tongue, float upward with the sound of tapping tools. Throughout the day, the atmosphere remains remarkably calm. There are no shouted orders, no frantic rush. Overseers move quietly among the workers, offering a word of guidance or praise. Women carry baskets of water and rice, ensuring that meals are ready at midday. Children play in the shade of half-built galleries, their laughter a gentle counterpoint to the rhythmic sound of chisels. The sheer scale of Angkor is difficult to comprehend. The temple complex stretches across miles of forest, its reservoirs, known as berets, reflecting the sky like inland seas. Each element serves both spiritual and practical purposes. The reservoirs not only symbolize cosmic oceans but also store water for rice cultivation, sustaining the population through dry seasons. This blending of faith and engineering defines the Khmer achievement, a civilization that worships the divine through the management of earth and water. As the sun reaches its zenith, heat shimmers across the stone surfaces. Workers pause to rest in the narrow shade of unfinished walls, sharing rice and fermented fish paste wrapped in banana leaves. Conversations drift softly, touching on family news, the health of the rice crop, or the turning of the monsoon winds. No single voice dominates. The building of Angkor is a collective act, a slow weaving of countless hands and quiet decisions. When the afternoon shadows lengthen, construction resumes with the same steady rhythm. Elephants haul new stones into place, their great feet patting softly on the packed earth. Monks from nearby monasteries walk among the workers, offering blessings and chants that mingle with the sound of hammers. The sacred and the ordinary intertwine until they are nearly indistinguishable. As dusk approaches, the workers lay down their tools. Smoke from cooking fires rises into the deepening sky, carrying the scent of lemongrass and charred fish. The unfinished towers catch the last light, glowing amber against the darkening forest. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell sounds, a low note that signals both the end of the day and the endurance of the work. Night falls slowly over the plain. Fireflies begin to flicker in the underbrush, their small lights echoing the stars that emerge above. The stones of Angkor rest in quiet darkness, holding within them the memory of thousands of hands and uncounted hours. Tomorrow the work will continue, as it has for years and will for many more. The temple grows not through sudden triumph but through the patient accumulation of effort, block by block, carving by carving. You stand in the warm night air, listening to the jungle's soft chorus. It is easy to imagine that the stones themselves are breathing, expanding and contracting with the rhythms of the earth. And you may wonder, as the moon rises over the silent towers, what drew so many ordinary people to give their strength and skill to a project whose completion they might never see. Was it devotion to the king, belief in the gods, or the quiet satisfaction of work well done? Perhaps all of these, perhaps something more elusive. The human impulse to build something that will outlast the builders themselves. The question lingers like a faint echo beneath the trees, waiting for the next day's labor to begin. Morning returns to Angkor not with fanfare but with a low mist rising from the berets, those immense reservoirs that glimmer like pale mirrors before the sun. You walk along an embankment and watch as a fisherman pushes his narrow boat into the still water, the pole of his or leaving ripples that spread outward until they fade into silence. The quiet is deceptive. Beneath the surface, a vast system of dikes, canals, and spillways channels the life of the Khmer Empire. To understand Angkor's temples, you must first understand its water. Engineers of the 12th century studied the monsoon with the patience of astronomers. They knew when rains would swell the rivers and when the dry months would demand stored reserves. Using only observation, bamboo poles, and a keen sense of gradient, they cut canals that ran arrow-straight for miles, connecting natural lakes to man-made basins. The largest, the West Beret, stretched nearly 5 miles across and held enough water to flood entire kingdoms elsewhere. From these reservoirs, smaller channels snaked toward rice paddies, feeding a population that may have surpassed 500,000. Each embankment was a communal effort. Villagers brought baskets of clay to reinforce the dikes. Children stamped the wet soil with bare feet, while elders packed it tight with wooden paddles. The labor was seasonal but unending. When one canal silted up, another had to be dredged. When a monsoon broke a dike, repairs began before the water fully receded. There was no question of completion. The water system was less a project than a living body that required constant tending. Temples like Angkor what rose within this watery lattice. They were not isolated monuments but nodes in a larger spiritual geography. The great moat surrounding Angkor what mirrored the cosmic ocean of Hindu cosmology. Its central tower represented Mount Meru, the axis of the universe, where gods and humans might meet. To approach the temple was to enact a quiet pilgrimage from the mundane to the eternal, crossing causeways that seemed to float between two worlds. Yet, for most people the sacred and the practical blurred. The same canals that symbolized heavenly oceans also watered their fields. The same reservoirs that reflected the stars also supplied fish for dinner. In the Khmer mind, there was no sharp division. Maintaining a dike was as pious as lighting incense before a statue of Vishnu. You can picture a day in the dry season. Farmers finish their morning meal of rice and salted fish, then walk to the edges of the baray with baskets and shovels. Monks in saffron robes supervise, offering blessings but also advice on slope and drainage. Children wade knee-deep in the shallows, chasing tiny silver fish. The sun climbs higher, and the clay walls bake hard, sealing in the precious water. By afternoon, dragonflies skim the surface like fragments of light. Meanwhile, within the temple walls, another rhythm unfolds. Priests chant Sanskrit verses before polished lingams and stone Buddhas, their voices echoing through pillared halls. Scribes copy royal edicts on palm leaf manuscripts, their handwriting slow and deliberate. They record donations of rice land to monasteries, lists of workers assigned to maintain reservoirs, and festivals to honor deities. These records, bound with thin strips of rattan, will survive centuries longer than their makers, offering us glimpses of a society at once devout and administrative. The king at the time, most likely Suryavarman II, whose name means protector of the sun, rarely appeared at the construction site. Yet his presence was felt in every stone. Royal inscriptions praised him as both universal monarch and earthly god, but they also detailed practical orders: quotas for stone, timetables for canal dredging, provisions for elephant fodder. Governance here was a matter of logistics as much as divinity. Among the workers, stories circulated of distant provinces where other temples were rising, each a rival and a complement to Angkor. There were rumors of Kampa sailors to the east, of traders from India bringing spices and bronze, of Chinese merchants descending the Mekong with silk and porcelain. The Khmer Empire was no isolated kingdom. It pulsed with trade routes that carried pepper, honey, lacquer, and ideas. At night, when the jungle softened into darkness, merchants lit small fires near the reservoirs and shared tales of storms on the South China Sea or of rare gemstones from Sri Lanka. What kept the builders loyal to such a vast endeavor? Taxes certainly played a role, as did the duty owed to a powerful king. Yet there was also the quiet dignity of collective purpose. A farmer who helped lay the foundation of a shrine might never see its completion, but his children could pray there. A stonecutter might know that his carving would stand long after his name was forgotten, and that was enough. Seasons turned. The rains came, drumming against the temple roofs, filling the moats until they overflowed into the forest. Lotus flowers bloomed across the berets, their pale petals drifting like pieces of cloud. When the waters receded, the cycle of maintenance began anew. From a distance, the city seemed eternal, its towers catching the sunrise as if nothing could disturb their balance. Yet subtle signs hinted at fragility. Sediment built up in canals faster than laborers could clear it. Deforestation on nearby hills sent sudden floods into carefully engineered basins. Farther north, political rivalries simmered among neighboring kingdoms. Angkor's planners accounted for many things, but time itself was their quiet adversary. As you stand at the edge of the great moat, the evening air heavy with the scent of wet leaves, you may sense that tension. The water still glimmers, but the jungle presses close. The temples remain serene, yet the system that sustains them requires endless vigilance. Perhaps the builders sensed it too, even as they worked. The knowledge that perfection, no matter how carefully carved, is always temporary. The moon rises, casting pale reflections across the reservoir. A heron lifts from the shallows, its wings beating once, twice, before it disappears into the dark canopy. The night is calm, but the question lingers like the echo of a distant drum. How long can a city endure when its greatness depends on a balance so delicate, when every stone and every drop of water must be tended without pause? The dawn that rises over Angkor centuries later is the same soft pearl gray as in its age of triumph, but the world it touches has changed. Stand now at the edge of the western moat and you will hear more insects than voices, more bird call than hammerstroke. The great waterworks remain, though many are choked with silt. The jungle presses in, vines draping over sandstone like slow-moving rivers of green. It is hard to imagine that this stillness was once the heartbeat of a vast empire. Historians trace the beginning of Angkor's long decline to the late 13th and early 14th centuries. The signs were gradual, almost imperceptible at first. Sediment from upstream forests, cut for building and fuel, clogged the intricate network of canals. When the monsoons came heavier than usual, the Barais overflowed, washing away embankments and drowning rice fields. In drier years, the same clogged channels failed to hold enough water, leaving paddies cracked and thirsty. Farmers adapted as best they could, but each generation faced a slightly narrower margin of security. The Khmer state had always relied on the ability to mobilize thousands for maintenance, but political stability was fraying. Royal succession disputes sapped the court's focus. Neighboring kingdoms, especially Ayutthaya to the west, pressed on the empire's borders. What had once been a single, coordinated water system slowly splintered into local fragments, each village maintaining what it could and letting the rest go. Amid these pressures, the spiritual heart of Angkor also shifted. The empire that built Angkor Wat in devotion to Vishnu gradually embraced Theravada Buddhism, a gentler, more individual path. The change was not abrupt. Shrines to Vishnu and Shiva still stood beside new images of the Buddha. Yet the shift mattered. Grand temple construction waned as devotion turned toward simpler monastic communities. Maintenance of vast, symbol-laden structures seemed less urgent when salvation no longer depended on monumental architecture. Through it all, the daily lives of ordinary people continued with quiet resilience. Farmers still planted rice when the rains came, still gathered fish and lotus roots, still lit incense to ancestors at dusk. Traders still arrived with baskets of salt, pepper, and lacquer. Even as the court's power waned, the rhythm of seasons and village festivals persisted. History, from the ground up, often moves more slowly than chronicles suggest. By the 15th century, the great city was a shadow of itself. When Siamese armies from Ayutthaya captured Angkor in 1431, they encountered a city already loosened from its peak. Many residents had drifted south toward the fertile floodplains near present-day Phnom Penh, where river trade along the Mekong offered new opportunities. Angkor was not burned to the ground, as some legends claim. It simply thinned out, its population ebbing like a slow tide. Temples that once rang with bells and chanting fell quiet. The jungle, patient and opportunistic, advanced without hurry. Seeds took root in cracked terraces. Banyan trees sent roots into the seams between stones, their slow pressure prying apart walls that no conqueror could breach. Monsoon rains fed moss and lichen, painting the carvings in shades of emerald and gold. Insects nested in galleries where kings once processed. Within a few generations, the forest canopy had become the dominant architecture. And yet the work of the silent builders endured. Angkor Wat remained largely intact, its moat still catching the reflection of sunrise. Buddhist monks, inheritors of a faith that had outlasted dynasties, continued to sweep the temple floors and light incense. Travelers from distant lands, Chinese envoys, later French explorers, found a place both abandoned and alive. What they saw was not mere ruin, but a different form of continuity. Stone wrapped in living green, a city that had learned to breathe with the forest. Standing today on the worn causeway, you can run your fingers along the carvings of apsaras that still dance on the walls. Their faces, though weathered, retain a softness that speaks of careful hands centuries gone. Each groove of a lotus petal is a signature without a name, a reminder that the builders did not work for fame. They worked because building itself was a kind of prayer, a slow affirmation of presence in a vast, impermanent world. Archaeologists now trace the old canals with satellites and ground surveys. They find evidence of villages that extended far beyond the main temples, a metropolis whose scale was hidden by the forest for centuries. Excavations reveal everyday artifacts: cooking pots, fish hooks, fragments of woven cloth. These quiet finds confirm what the stones always suggested, that Angkor was not just a place of kings, but a living network of farmers, traders, and artisans whose ordinary lives sustained an extraordinary vision. The silent builders never saw the future we inhabit, but they might recognize something in our own restless desire to create lasting marks. We too build cities, reservoirs, and monuments hoping to outweat time. Angkor reminds us that endurance is not the same as permanence. The city did not vanish. It changed form, slipping from imperial capital to forest sanctuary to heritage site visited by millions. Its story is not of sudden fall, but of slow transformation, human ambition blending back into the larger rhythms of earth and water. As evening deepens, the forest around the temples hums with cicadas. A breeze stirs the tall grasses that have replaced ceremonial processions. The towers of Angkor what darken against a fading sky, their outlines as calm as when they were new. You breathe in the damp air, heavy with the scent of soil and lotus, and you feel the patient weight of centuries. What do we learn from such endurance? Perhaps that our greatest works are never solely ours. They belong to the landscape, to the generations who maintain them in ways we cannot predict, and to the quiet passage of time itself. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a bell sounds from a modern monastery, a single clear tone that carries across the moat. It mingles with the night and fades, leaving only the steady chorus of insects. You listen until the sound becomes memory, and the memory becomes part of the silence. And you may wonder, as countless visitors have before you, when our own cities have softened and the forests have reclaimed their ground, what echoes of our labor will remain for someone else to find? The first sound of Istanbul in the 17th century is not the call to prayer, nor the clatter of horse hooves on the Galata cobbles. It is the hush before dawn, when the Bosporus lies flat as poured mercury and a faint salt smell drifts from the Marmara Sea. In the narrow backstreets of the city's markets, another rhythm quietly stirs, the measured footsteps of bakers who rise long before the sun. You join them as they move through twisting lanes still damp with night air. Their wool cloaks smell faintly of yeast and smoke. Each carries a small brass lantern, the light trembling against the walls of stone houses. Istanbul is immense, a city of sultans and sailors, of scholars and street hawkers, but at this hour it belongs to the bakers. They are anonymous yet indispensable, for bread is not merely food here. It is daily sustenance, social expectation, and even political currency. The bakery doors open to reveal a world of soft flour and quiet industry. Inside, the air is warm though no fire yet burns. The ovens, enormous, domed structures of brick and clay, retain the previous day's heat like sleeping animals. An apprentice sweeps the stone floor with a broom of bundled twigs, while another kneads dough that has been fermenting overnight in shallow wooden troughs. The yeast, a natural mixture passed from baker to baker for generations, breathes a slow rhythm into the room. The flour itself arrives from distant provinces of the empire. Barges from the Black Sea bring wheat from Thrace and Anatolia. The grain is milled in water-powered mills along the Golden Horn before being carried in heavy sacks through the city's arched bazaars. Merchants haggle over prices that fluctuate with weather, harvests, and politics. A poor yield in the Balkans or a delayed convoy from the Danube can send the price of bread upward overnight, and with it the mood of the city. Ottoman rulers know this well. Bread riots have toppled officials in the past, and the Sultan's council keeps careful watch over supply and price. Inspectors from the imperial kitchen make unannounced visits to bakeries, weighing loaves and checking for adulterated flour. Penalties for short weight are steep. Fines, public shaming, even temporary closure of the shop. The bakers work under this quiet pressure, aware that their craft is as much a civic duty as a livelihood. As the first gray light seeps into the alleys, the head baker, USTA, arrives. His hands are thick and strong, dusted permanently with flour. Without a word, he tests the dough by touch, pressing a thumb gently into its surface and watching how it springs back. He nods, satisfied, and motions to the apprentices. The ovens must be stoked. Bundles of oak and beech are fed into the firebox, the wood chosen not for scent but for its steady, even heat. Soon the bricks glow a deep, breathing orange. The day's first loaves are shaped with calm precision. Some are round-pied with indented patterns that catch sesame seeds. Others are long, slender somen destined for soldiers and laborers. For the wealthy, there will be simmet rings coated in golden sesame, their crusts shining with a quick glaze of molasses water. Each type has its own small rituals. The exact stretch of dough, the flick of the wrist that seals an edge, the spacing on the wooden peel. The bakers move like dancers in a slow, practiced routine. Outside, the city is beginning to wake. The first call to prayer floats across the rooftops, a melody from countless minarets that overlaps in gentle waves. Market porters stir in their sleep, fishermen ready their nets, and the faint creak of ships at anchor drifts from the harbor. Yet the streets near the bakery remain hushed, holding their breath for the scent that will soon spill from the oven doors. As the flames settle, the head baker judges the temperature not with a thermometer but with his eyes and the back of his hand. He scatters a handful of flour on the oven floor. If it browns without burning, the heat is right. The first loaves slide in, their surfaces brushed with water to create a crisp crust. The smell begins almost immediately. Warm grain, sweet yeast, a hint of smoke. It seeps through cracks in the shutters, carrying a promise to every corner of the street. By the time the sun lifts above the eastern hills, a small line has formed outside. Women in wool shawls, children clutching copper coins, a few soldiers in dark cloaks. They wait in patient silence, baskets ready. Bread is not simply purchased. It is shared news, a chance to greet neighbors, to measure the day. The USTA opens the door and the scent floods the alley like a tide. Steam curls into the cold morning air as the first loaves emerge, their crusts crackling softly. You notice how carefully the bakers handle each loaf. They tap the bottoms for a hollow sound that signals perfection, then wrap them in thin cloths to keep the heat. Coins clink, words are exchanged, but there is no rush. Even the children grow quiet, lulled by the warmth and rhythm of the ritual. Bread here is a small ceremony of trust. The baker promises nourishment. The city promises respect. Behind the counter, apprentices continue to knead and shape, preparing for the second baking. Some loaves will travel across the Bosporus on ferries, others to the kitchens of wealthy households, still others to soldiers guarding the city walls. A portion is always set aside for the poor, a tradition reinforced by both Islamic charity and imperial decree. No one in Istanbul should go hungry if the ovens can help it. The morning deepens. Sunlight finds its way down the narrow street, striking the flour-dusted walls in patches of gold. Inside, the heat is steady, the rhythm unbroken. A scribe from the neighborhood Madrid stops to collect the day's bread for his students. He exchanges a few quiet words with the USTA about grain prices and the latest edict from the palace. Nothing dramatic, only the steady hum of a city sustained by flour and fire. As you linger in the warm air, you begin to understand the subtle power of these bakers. They are not celebrated in chronicles or court records, yet the life of the capital depends on their discipline. A missed delivery of grain or a poorly tended oven could ripple through the city, stirring unrest as surely as a political scandal. The Sultan may rule from his Topkapi palace, but the real stability of Istanbul begins here, in the patient hands of men and women who rise before dawn to feed the city. Outside, a gull cries over the harbor, and the scent of fresh bread drifts toward the water, mingling with the salt of the sea. You can almost imagine sailors catching the aroma as they ready their ships, a quiet reminder that the day has begun. But as you watch the apprentices prepare yet another batch of dough, a question lingers like the soft haze of flour in the air. How did these humble bakers maintain their delicate balance, serving the palace, the people, and their own families, when the politics of empire and the unpredictability of harvests could shift in an instant? Before the ovens can warm a single loaf, the empire must feed the city with grain. Istanbul's bakers are only the final link in a chain that stretches hundreds of miles across mountains, rivers, and seas. To understand their quiet influence, you must follow the grain itself. Much of the city's wheat arrives from the rich plains of Thrace and the valleys of Anatolia. Caravans of ox-drawn carts move through these regions after harvest, their wheels leaving slow, deliberate grooves in dusty roads. Farmers tie sheaves with care, knowing that each bundle may feed thousands once it reaches the capital. Merchants sign contracts at small village inns, their ledgers marked in neat Ottoman script. When the caravans reach the coast, the journey becomes maritime. Flat-bottomed boats gather along the Black Sea ports, their holds lined with straw to keep the grain dry. Sailors watch the skies for sudden storms that can rise without warning. A single gale on the Bosporus can delay delivery and send bread prices upward overnight. Imperial officials track each ship's progress, their reports carried by swift riders to the palace kitchens and the council chambers of the divan. At the city's great harbors, Galata, Eminonu, and Üsküdar, the grain is unloaded into vast warehouses called ambers. Here, inspectors weigh every sack. They note its origin, moisture, and quality, ensuring that no merchant has mixed husks or sand to cheat the state. The warehouses themselves are marvels of quiet engineering, their thick stone walls and cool interiors keeping grain free of damp and pests. Cats roam the rafters, half wild but tolerated, their job to keep mice at bay. The Sultan's government, fully aware of bread's central role, treats grain as both necessity and strategy. Edicts known as canonames set maximum bread prices and minimum loaf weights. Officials called mutisib patrol bakeries, carrying brass scales to check compliance. A baker who shortchanges the public can be fined heavily or, in extreme cases, marched through the streets in humiliation, a small loaf hung around his neck. Such punishments are rare but memorable. Word travels fast along Istanbul's alleys. For bakers, these rules bring a delicate balance. They must purchase flour at fluctuating wholesale prices while selling bread at a fixed retail rate. A poor harvest in distant Rumelia or a delayed convoy from the Danube can cut profits to nothing. To survive, bakers rely on relationships, trust with millers, quiet credit from merchants, and the watchful goodwill of their neighborhood customers. Reputation is their most precious currency. Inside the bakery, you see how these distant politics filter into daily life. The USTA listens as a grain merchant delivers news of rising prices along the Black Sea coast. His expression remains calm, but you notice a slight tightening around his eyes. He must plan how to stretch the current stock without reducing the weight of each loaf. Perhaps he will shift more production to simit, which uses slightly less dough per serving. Perhaps he will negotiate with another supplier for a small delivery at a better price. Apprentices, meanwhile, keep the routine unbroken. They measure water by feel, not cup, adding a trickle until the dough reaches the right elasticity. One stirs a mixture of sesame seeds and molasses for the morning's final batch of simit. Another tends the fire, feeding it with oak logs chosen for their steady burn. The bakery hums like a well-tuned instrument, steady against the uncertainties outside. As the sun climbs higher, customers arrive not just for bread but for conversation. An elderly scholar from the Madriz brings news of a new decree requiring every district to report grain stocks weekly. A sailor speaks of sudden fog on the Bosporus that held ships offshore for an entire night. A woman carrying a basket of herbs mentions a rumor of poor harvests near Edirne. Each fragment adds to the USDA's understanding of the invisible web that sustains his craft. Across the city, similar scenes unfold. In every quarter, from the steep lanes of Balat to the gardens of Üsküdar, bakeries serve as quiet information hubs. Customers trade neighborhood gossip and political whispers along with their coins. In a city of scholars and merchants, the price of bread is the pulse everyone feels. A sudden shortage can spark unrest more quickly than any proclamation from the palace. The Sultan's own kitchens depend on these same networks. The imperial palace employs its own bakers, but they too rely on the flow of grain from the provinces. Court officials visit public bakeries not only to inspect but to learn, listening for signs of discontent. A long queue or a sudden jump in price is more than an economic detail. It is an early warning. Late morning brings a quieter rhythm. The first wave of customers has passed, and the bakery breathes in a rare pause. The apprentices sweep flour from the counters, preparing for the next round of dough. The USTA takes a moment to sip strong, unsweetened coffee brought by a neighboring vendor. The conversation turns to family matters: a daughter's engagement, an aging parent's health, the rising cost of firewood. For all its political weight, bread remains woven into the ordinary fabric of life. Outside, the city hums in full daylight. The call of street vendors rises. Sellers of pomegranates, fishmongers with baskets of glistening sardines, water carriers balancing leather skins. From the harbor comes the creak of ship masts and the shouts of porters. Somewhere, a procession of janissaries marches toward the barracks, their boots striking the cobblestones in perfect unison. Yet in the bakery's warm interior, time slows to the rhythm of rising dough. You begin to sense how these bakers occupy a subtle but powerful space. They are neither nobles nor common laborers, neither fully merchants nor mere artisans. Their craft sits at the intersection of sustenance and governance, their daily discipline supporting a city of 500,000 souls. Without them, the palaces would be uneasy, the markets restless, the streets prone to riot. As afternoon light filters through the narrow windows, the USTA begins preparations for the evening bake. He checks the stores of flour and counts the coins from the morning. His fingers, thick with callus, move with the same care he shows a loaf. Outside, clouds gather over the Bosporus, hinting at a change in wind. A merchant's warning of storms feels suddenly closer. And you may wonder, watching the steady hands that shape each loaf, when tempests rise on the Black Sea or politics shift in the palace, how do these quiet craftsmen keep the city fed without faltering? What hidden strategies will carry them through the night and into another dawn? Evening arrives with a softness that belies the effort of the day. The last light bends across the Bosporus, casting copper glints on the rippled water. Lamps flicker to life in narrow streets, their glow mingling with the scent of wood smoke. Within the bakery, the ovens roar quietly, their heat steady and familiar. You step closer and feel the shift. The pace has slowed, yet the work has not ceased. The apprentices knead dough in deliberate motions, a rhythm set by years of practice. Their shoulders rise and fall like tidewater. Outside, the city murmurs, vendors closing stalls, children darting home, the muezzin's call floating through the dusk. This final bake is the city's heartbeat after dark. Istanbul's residents expect fresh bread even as the night deepens. Fishermen heading to the pre-dawn catch, guards at the palace gates, families lingering after evening prayers. All will seek the warmth of a loaf that has only just left the oven. The USTA supervises with a quiet authority. He tests the dough's resilience with a gentle press, then signals for the shaping to begin. Round loaves for the wealthy households, slender simmet rings dusted with sesame for the night markets, and long, flat pied for sailors who prefer bread they can fold around dried fish. Each type has its own cooling basket and its own unspoken story. Across the counter, a small brass scale waits, the symbol of the mutisib's oversight. Though no inspector is expected at this hour, the USTA weighs a sample loaf. It meets the mandated standard exactly. Centuries of imperial edicts have shaped these habits until they are second nature. To cheat the weight, even by a handful of grams, would be to betray not just the law but the fragile trust between baker and neighbor. When the first trays enter the great stone oven, a hush falls. Firelight paints the walls in slow gold. The apprentices move in near-silent coordination, sliding wooden paddles under raw dough and turning them with a slight twist of the wrist. Sparks rise and vanish. The smell deepens, earthy grain, toasted sesame. a sweetness from the molasses wash on the simmet. While the bread bakes, the USTA recounts the day's small intelligence to a visiting grain merchant. The rumor of storms in the Black Sea, the new tax on imported oak for firewood, the whispered news that a Janissary unit has been redeployed to the eastern frontier. These fragments of conversation are more than idle talk. They are the delicate signals of a city balancing commerce, politics, and survival. Customers begin to drift in. A palace guard on his night rotation purchases 2 loaves and lingers to warm his hands. A pair of scribes from a nearby Madriz debate a point of jurisprudence while waiting for their simmet. An elderly woman, her shawl wrapped tightly against the evening chill, selects a small pie and asks after the baker's family. The bakery becomes, as it has for centuries, a meeting place for the city's quieter souls. Beyond the door, Istanbul settles into its nocturnal life. Coffeehouses fill with poets and chess players. Storytellers weave epics to audiences who sip from porcelain cups. Along the harbor, lanterns bob beside the fishermen's boats. Yet even here, the scent of fresh bread drifts downwind, a gentle reassurance that tomorrow's dawn will arrive with sustenance. You begin to notice the subtler textures. The way the oven's crackle echoes faintly in the tiled ceiling, the delicate mist of flour suspended in warm air, the muted clink of copper coins as each transaction is made. Nothing is rushed. Each detail affirms a truth that the empire has long understood. Bread is stability. Its presence calms the crowd more effectively than proclamations or soldiers. As midnight approaches, the final batches cool on wooden racks. The USTA inspects them with a craftsman's pride, tapping the crust to listen for the hollow sound that signals perfect baking. The apprentices wrap loaves in coarse linen for merchants who will collect them before dawn. A thin ledger records every sale: weight, time, price, name. In this meticulous bookkeeping lies a quiet continuity that has outlasted wars and sultans alike. Outside, the city grows still. Only the faint splash of oars and the distant bark of dogs break the silence. In the sky, stars emerge through a thin veil of mist, mirrored in the dark strait. The bakery's lamps cast a narrow glow on the cobblestones, a beacon for late wanderers. You reflect on how these bakers, often unnoticed by chroniclers, keep Istanbul's vast population steady. Their work requires no grand speeches or visible triumphs. Yet the empire leans on them as surely as on its generals or viziers. Grain routes may shift, taxes may rise, and storms may scatter ships, but the ovens endure. The USTA wipes his hands, satisfied. Tomorrow, before the first call to prayer, he and his apprentices will begin again, mixing, kneading, and feeding the city that depends on their constancy. The rhythm will remain unchanged, as reliable as the tides that carry grain to the harbor. And as you linger in the quiet glow, a thought settles like the flour on the countertop. What other silent crafts sustain empires across centuries, shaping the fate of millions without ever seeking recognition?